Hey guys, I'm Fancy.
And I'm Colleen.
And this is Murder by Design. Hey guys, welcome back to Murder by Design. Tonight we have a pretty special event. It's going to be a double header. We've got two of our really favorite experts on with us. So we've got, as always, our very favorite #1 leading death expert in the country, Joseph Scott Morgan. He's going to be talking, we get into a lot of things with him tonight, but he's going to be talking about, mostly the Vallow case and some of the updates that we have on that. He'll talk about what really happened and what he's looking to see as the autopsies come down the line.
Mm-hmm. And we'll also talk a little bit about Jeffrey Epstein. So now that we've got some updates about Miss Maxwell being arrested and kind of what the thoughts on going from there and how we're waiting to see on some information that will keep coming out of there. But then also after that, we will be playing an interview with Cloyd Steiger. And he was a homicide detective in Seattle for over 20 years. He worked
on some huge cases,
he's done lots of cases, and he's on a lot of different committees out there, still is. And he'll give you a brief rundown on everything that he's done in his career. But as a homicide detective, he really goes deep into how you go about these investigations. And he's been following the Vallow case since it kind of first started coming out in around February, March. And then he'll give us some updates on that, where he thinks things are at now and what the future will go for the case as of the information that we know now.
Right. So we've got a lot for you tonight. So you're just going to buckle up and hold on, because we talk about everything from COVID to Jeffrey Epstein and the Vallows. So it's a lot to take in, but it's some really good stuff that we're bringing forward here. Great information, good insight, as always, from our experts. So buckle up and hold on. You looked much more rested than the last time I saw you.
Yeah. Slow down a little bit. I'm still kind of tired, but hey,
Yeah. That's the life we live, right?
I do a lot of running, so yeah.
Yeah.
How have you been?
I'm busy, super busy.
Well, good.
It seems like every time I'm like, okay, maybe this week it won't be so busy, and then it's like 9 things happen in a case, and I'm like, could people just stop killing people? That'd be really great.
Well, it's job security, People are always going to kill one another. They used to.
Right.
I used to scare people or really put people back on their heels. I'd be talking to somebody at a party, and there'd be some infamous case.
Yeah.
Nationally, and I'd say, "Wow, I wish I could have been out there." And people would say, "How can you say that?" It's like, well, somebody like me was out there. I wish that I could have caught the case.
Right.
Because, it's that kind of stuff that's stimulating sometimes.
Sometimes it's exhausting and stimulating, maybe, but
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. This the little 8-year-old girl that just got killed in Atlanta. I was raging about that earlier today. I was very upset. So
yeah, it's an upsetting thing.
It's very sad.
And the fact that no one out of that entire crowd has rolled over on the person that did the shooting is as equally upsetting.
Well, it's equally upsetting to me that the mayor has allowed this to go on. Like, she wants to call them out. Well, you allowed them to stay there before and after. So what are you really doing, ma'am? Because you can point fingers all you want and say it's you. But at some point in time, you've got to say it's I, right? Right. Because this is not okay.
She's conveniently tested positive for corona now.
Yeah.
Or COVID,
right?
or what they call it,
Yeah. So, she'll be, so this is, I wasn't able to do anything. I was at home, and I was worried about myself and my family, and yeah.
Well, I was in Atlanta.
Atlanta has a bunch of problems right now. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, they always have. When I was working with the ME, we had the, let's see, which riots were they? It was the Rodney King riots occurred all simultaneously. And they had made a big deal out of the fact that we had the first African-American female police chief in Atlanta at that time.
Yeah.
And it's this big historic monumental thing. And the riots happened, I guess, within about 6 months of her taking office. And if you've ever heard of Underground Atlanta, which is supposed to be this tourist area, it's a horrible area. Don't ever go there. But at any rate, there was a big LL Bean store that was right on the street, and crowds gathered in the middle of the street, and they were knocking windows out of all the business, including LL Bean. They were jumping in the windows in front of the police, and the police had set up a kind of a skirmish line, and they were in their riot gear, and they're standing there, and the crowd is like yelling at the police, and it panned back toward the chief, whose name's Beverly Harvard.
Yep.
And they did a close-up on her face, and she's standing in the middle of the street, chief of police, and she's weeping. And I'm thinking, this is not what you want in the chief of police. So it was just kind of it was one of those moments in time where you kind of...
Yeah, no, the Rodney King stuff happened my senior year of high school. And so I was in California when all that went down. And it was some scary, scary shit, let me tell you. That was, man.
I'm a big fan of containment. I don't think there's any need to wade in and risk anybody's life. They did that in the Liberty City riots in the early 80s in Miami. The police came in and kind of cordoning the area off, and people wanted to burn everything down and destroy everything. Fine, if people wanted out, they would let them out. But as far as going in and attempting to quell the violence or whatever it is that's going on, that's not what police are set up to do. That's not a function of the police.
Right.
So it is what it is. In life, all three of us have paid consequences for everything we've ever done in our life, either good or bad.
Right. That's right.
And that's why I like Newton's third law. I love the idea that for every action there's an opposite and equal reaction, and it does happen that way. So you got to be careful how far you pull the pendulum, because it's going to swing back one way or another. And it hurts.
This time, sadly, this little girl, she's 8 years old. She's paying for the price for this, and it's not okay.
The press conference with the parents was heartbreaking. It really was. Very much so. But hey, it's it is what it is. I mean, what are you going to do?
The only other time I've ever cried because of a press conference was the Leticia Stout.
I was going to say, again, in Stout case.
Yeah, with Landon, and she was just broken down. And this was the same thing, like watching this mother collapse on stage. And I'm thinking, we must do better. This is not okay. We must do better. And that's why our campaign that we've been, trying to push out there, the Love Wins with Cheryl and everybody, it's so important right now. This is the only way we're going to get through this, is to stop the violence and the anger and actually sit down and speak with one another, because this is not getting it done, folks. It's not getting it done,
Well, I was always a big proponent of morgue visits and mandatory autopsy visits. Everybody gathers around. If you're currently in the system, and particularly if you're a young offender, it should be used as a fulcrum, I think, and they used to do it in Dallas to quite some effect. Of course, people are so tender now, except of course when they're on the working end of a firearm. Right. They don't understand. They don't understand. They don't understand the constructs that are involved, and just from the science standpoint of what happens, and all the all the social stuff and all that sort of thing, you can scream about that until the cows come home.
Yes.
But until people are hit with kind of the reality of what that metallic, sickly, sweet smell of blood is like, what it looks like to dissect a body of a young person that has been riddled by trauma.
Yeah.
That's one of the most striking things that people can, we've, I wrote an article in Vice magazine a few years ago about how I think that in our society we have so desensitized the idea of death where, and I'll give you an example. I wrote in that piece, I talked about how, when we die, we float above the remains of our body. We float through some town over a Jiffy Lube and a Burger King onto a location that, we've never known. And in those moments when we're dying and they roll us in the hospital, I talked about how we're touched by hands that never cared for us. They say they care for us. They work in a hospital and that sort of thing. But and our remains, or what's left of us, is pushed through scientific like doors that shut behind us. We're wheeled into a room where someone cracks our chest open that tries to bring us and breathe us back into life. But then at the end of the day, we all die all alone. And it's been so sanitized, even the idea of death. It really goes to the heart of who we are societally, because, in my grandmother's generation out in the country, what they would do was that if a family member died, the door was coming off of the hinges in the biggest room with the biggest door. It was going to be put between two chairs. The women of the family would get together, strip all of the clothing off the body. They would wash the body. They would prepare the body. The men would go out and dig a grave. People would sing songs and cry and do all those things. And it was very tactile. We don't have that now. Our lives are hermetically sealed. It's very plastic. And the best you're going to hope for is to show up at some funeral home somewhere with a guy with fancy hair that talks with a televangelist voice, and they throw up some cheap ass PowerPoint presentation about your life and the music they think you liked. And there's nothing, and they rush the family in and out, and it's like, next, okay, let's bring the next one in. So nobody has any value of life, and they don't understand the pain that's involved in it until that one moment in time where it happens to them. And then no one else can identify with them. And it's and here, I submit Exhibit 1A of this 8-year-old little girl that is blown to pieces because there is no value placed on that life. And I think that right-thinking people will, sooner or later, one way or another, they'll be forced into that reality where they're going to realize that with death comes pain, that death is reality. And people like to go on and talk about how much they care about the families and how their heart breaks for them, until you got the blood of the family or your loved one on your hands and you understand the reality of that. You see it actually happening in real time. It's not hermetically sealed. We've ventured so far past that in our society that no one understands it now. That's just my thought.
No, you're talking about this horrible stuff, and this cat is killing me right now. And I'm like, I'm sitting here, one hand I'm trying not to cry, and another I'm sitting here laughing at Colleen's cat. I'm dying right now. But no, I totally get you. Like, my family, when my mom passed away, nobody was with me. It was just me and my mom. I was at the hospice, and the hospice workers had actually told me to go home that evening. And I was like, no, I'm not leaving her. I just have to be here. And I just knew. And she got that rumble, the rumble in the chest.
Death rattle.
The death rattle. I couldn't think of the name of it. The death rattle, right? Yep. And I called in the lady, and she goes, oh, she's very close now, honey. And so I sang my mom off to death. I sang her favorite song, and I held her, and I told her it was okay to go, because I just really felt like she was hanging on just for me, and then she left. But then my family, like, the jerks that they are, they decide, oh, well, we'll handle the whole, the funeral for her and everything. So you don't have to worry about it. And I'm like, well, thanks, and then I get down there and I'm told that the funeral is going to be held in the back of a Sizzler. And I was like, a what? Like in the back room, like we had our own private room. I'm like, but it's a Sizzler. And they're like, yeah, that's, I'm like, we're not going to church. Like, we grew up in the church. Like, I don't understand. What do you mean we're going to Sizzler? This is ridiculous. And they couldn't understand why I was angry. And I'm like, because you're desecrating her memory right now. Like, this is how much she meant to you. This is your sister. This is your daughter. And this is what it means to you. Great. Thanks. I wished I really had just done it myself. Thank you so very, very much, and it was very hard for me. And how angry I was, because I just felt like they didn't even care enough to do the bare minimum, and that was upsetting to me. And I've held it against my aunt for years because it was so just whatever,
Well, like I've been dealing with a lot. So my great grandma passed away last month. She had a stroke and a brain bleed 2 years ago, and so she was on hospice for a really long time. And then they said she was only going to live for like 6 weeks, and so but she didn't pass away after that. She was still alive for the last 2 years and was on like a hospice unit at a local nursing home, and she was doing good. We all saw her on for Christmas. It's when Tim and I announced that we had gotten married to our entire family, and then we knew she wasn't doing good because with COVID they had stopped letting family members in to feed people, and she wasn't eating well for the AIDS, and she didn't want to live past the stroke 2 years ago. But without my great aunts and uncles being able to go visit her, she wasn't doing well. And then she ended up passing away last month.
No, I'm sorry. It's horrible.
Thank you. Yeah, she was my inspiration. She was in her mid-90s. She was.
But, didn't you find, Colleen, that there's something that's very I found this, and I've written about this extensively, about this experience with death with family members, even with decomposed bodies. People will rush bodies. And when I mean rush, I mean like rush up on bodies, grab them, roll around the ground with them. They'll do it. I think that as creatures, I used the word just a second ago, as creatures, we're very tactile, and one of the things we experience life, even as a small, you've been around children. They want to put everything, they want to touch everything, put everything in their mouth, and it's very sensory. And if you even look at a mama dog who's lost a pup, she'll go over and nuzzle that pup to move it around and investigate it and experience that. I see dogs. I see dogs treat their dead better than humans treat our dead.
Right.
Yes.
And
yeah.
it's a diminishment. And I talked about this in the Vallow case. I was on with Ashley Banfield the other day on Court TV, and I talked about the diminishment of humanity when it comes to Tyllee and what was done to her body. And this is this effort to destroy, when you can diminish. I'm sorry, I misspoke. It was on Fox Nation, the Nancy Grace.
Yeah, I listened to you on there.
We did a documentary about it. Yep. Anyway, it's a diminishment of humanity. It cheapens the person, and for some reason, something has happened and I'm not saying that people have not been dismembered and burned and all those things for centuries. They have been. We've been through horrific times in the past. But now it's almost like the world that we live in is, the only way I can really describe it is plastic. It's a synthetic world. And synthetic things are very easy to tear up. All you got to do is go look at your kids' toys, and they're torn apart, and they're discarded, waiting for the next one to come along. And that's kind of the way we are in the world that we're in right now. And I think that you know, technology and, you know, everything that just disconnected. We were disconnected very much so, you know, before all of this, but now with COVID and then you know, I got to tell you, I'm teaching this fall, and I don't know. I don't know at this point. They're saying I will. They're saying I'll go into the classroom, but I don't know that that's going to happen. My son's getting ready to leave for boot camp in 7 days, and he's going to be quarantined for, I guess, a week or 2 weeks when he gets there. And it's that separation, you know, that we have, and it really desensitizes people and it diminishes people to a great degree. So that's the reality.
I agree. And I think that the more that we're having this through COVID, where we're having less and less contact and less, you know, physical contact with even each other, I think it's getting worse and worse. Like I see.
I'm going to go out on a limb here.
Going down.
You know, for years and years, I've gone to seminars. I've never been a big serial killer kind of. It's just not something. I've worked on a lot of different, on three separate series of serial killings over the course of my career that I was aware of. But it was never something that really fascinated me. You know, it was just, it's just not something that was a driver for me, you know. And so, but the one thing that, you know, you always hear about some of the psychopathology that goes on with people is that they're able to this disassociative thing, you know, that they have psychologically where it makes it easy for them to destroy people and rip them to shreds and use them for their own pleasure. It's almost like we've got a seed that has been planted that where in the past that was kind of relegated to people that were dictators and people that were serial killers. Now we've got a society full of people that don't value life. I mean, it's just it's
a bad problem.
It is. I think it is.
I do too. And I think the hardest part is that as now we're seeing a spike, and I believe this is still the first wave, and it's spiking out of control across the country, that because people are over it at this point, you know, we're going on 6 months of, you know, having people stay home and social distance and quarantine, and people are just getting tired of doing it. Well, unfortunately, that leads to more people getting sick and more people dying. Then people get desensitized to the amount of death that we see every day and how every single family will have known somebody who has died from this. And as it spirals worse and worse, it's kind of becoming now, okay, well, COVID is here to stay, deal with it. And people are just kind of now going to have to get used to people dying every day from, and I mean,
people die every day anyway, Colleen. I mean,
right. So that's the same. It's like people die every day, but this is something that it's not like, you know, with, you know, wear a seatbelt in car accidents and don't text and drive or don't drink and drive.
Well, I mean, but hundreds of thousand people die from various things every year, you know, and especially the flu and pneumonia and things. So I feel, and we've talked about this before, in the fact that I feel like what we've done here is create this certain culture with this one thing that probably is not what we should have done. I really truly believe that we should have handled this way differently. You know?
I had I'll give you a quick story. I know that we're going to go on to Vallow, but this has nothing to do with COVID, but it does have to do with a broader theme. Many years ago at the ME's office, we had, and it made me think about it because they were, you know, there's been a lot of talk about all the nursing home deaths, you know, these, and I can't wait to see the epidemiology on this because it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But at the ME's office in Atlanta, we used a potter's field, which is a large area where you bury the indigent, you bury the unknown, essentially. And essentially, when I first started, back when dinosaurs were on the earth in New Orleans, you could go to an area and they would trench that area out and we'd save the bodies. And you just had a huge mass grave where bodies were in and
Right.
body bags that had metal tags on them, and you just stack them like cordwood. You'd save them up is what would happen. In Atlanta, they were kind of doing the same thing. And we would have one of these burials like every 6 months or something. And so one of the local reporters got wind of it. I guess they were just looking for a story, they're bored. And so they came over and talked to us about it. They wrote a piece about, where do the unclaimed dead go, in Atlanta. Well, it was, it was a good bathroom read. You take it in there and you go to the bathroom or whatever the fact might be, and then you pass it on. But then some local preachers got wind of it, and they raised 40 kinds of hell over it. And man, they had a conference on the front, the front steps of the courthouse and outside the ME's office, and all this hoo-ha went on. And they said, you can't do this to people, and they're humans, and we demand that every time y'all have a indigent burial. Now, we've been doing these for years. It's not like it just magically started.
Right.
Every time you have the local pastors council demands that y'all contact us, and we're going to come out and we're going to say last rites over the body. Every preacher's going to have an opportunity to say something over these poor unclaimed souls. Okay, well, that's fine. We'll be more than happy. We'll supply the bodies and dig the hole. Y'all show up. And we did this. We obliged them, and they showed up in all of their finery. The cameras were there. Everybody had hats on, and funny looking hats, and fine robes and everything else. And they were hooting and hollering and screaming out to the Lord and carrying on. And then the cameras disappeared, and they went on about their business. And we, metaphorically patted the bodies in the face with a shovel. That's an old Southern term. And 6 months later, we had a mess of bodies to be buried again.
And nobody came. And
so we called the local pastors council and said, "Hey, y'all wanted to do this. We're ready, and this is the day we're going to do it." And of course they, Brother James can't show up, and Sister Edna can't show up, and whatnot. We're going to do it anyway. We've got to, because whether you're aware of it or not, people never stop dying. They die
exactly.
24/7. And they're going to continue to die, whether you show up or not. And so I think that's people beat their chest and they pull their hair and they scream and they carry on and whatnot. And at the end of the day, because my area is death, my area is not life.
Right.
At the end of the day, city planners or city commissioners and county commissioners and people like that, when you ask them, can we do better for the dead in our community? No, we need to have another after school program. We need to build another park, or we need to do this.
Right.
Dead are still being buried in unmarked graves. No effort is being made to do DNA on the dead to try to ramp things up to find out who their loved ones might be. That's not important to them, because as Dr. Minyard in New Orleans said famously a few years ago on a documentary about death investigation in America, he said, I want, and he said this to the people at NPR, I want you to put this up on your screen in big letters. The dead do not vote. And that's the harsh cold reality of it. And that's kind of where we find ourselves now. And my hat off to the people with the ME in New York in particular, because I don't know what they're doing. I have no idea. I know they had temporary job openings. They were looking for legal death investigators like me to come up there on temporary assignment for like I think it was like an 18-month contract, because they just needed people to come up and handle COVID deaths that were going to be assigned to it. And I know I've had 2 people reach out to me about it. You couldn't chase me fast enough to give me one of those jobs, but I'm just saying those jobs exist out there.
Yeah, no, I told that to a person we interviewed yesterday about how my friend Sam, she is a forensic anthropologist, and they asked her if she would be a coroner for the city for this time. They were like, well, you could either do COVID deaths or you could do the non-COVID deaths.
Right.
And
Yep.
she's like, I do bones. I don't do bodies. I
Right.
can't do it. No,
Right.
she's straight up
Right.
refused.
Well,
and luckily
and
in Wisconsin, we haven't had a massive surge of
right.
cases around here, though we did have an Amber Alert yesterday.
Well, I think that, in this whole thing, like, what I was saying wasn't that we shouldn't have done certain things. I understand that. But what I think was it was a hopeful idea that we could somehow outrun this thing. And that's when what I was upset about the whole time is that we're not outrunning this, folks. We're not outrunning death. We're not. It's here. It's going to be here. The flu hasn't gone anywhere, and it's been around for a long time. Pneumonia's not gone anywhere. It's been around for a long time. We can't even cure the common cold. What on earth makes you think we're going to outrun this?
Yeah.
And so I feel like having that thought process from the beginning, that we're going to do something to stop this, knowing that there was no way to, I think gave certain people false senses of hope. And then I believe that in the end, it's going to do much more damage in many ways that we've not considered, because of the effects. And like Colleen said, now we're desensitized to it now. Now everybody's like, oh, another COVID death. Oh, another COVID death. Or, oh, another person has COVID. We don't care anymore because for 6 months we've been told we're doing so well. We're going to do this. No, we're not. No, we're not. And that's the sad part of all of this. That was the reality that I saw in the very beginning. And people thought I was being harsh or mean or whatever. But no, I was looking at the reality of the situation of, guys, it's not going anywhere. I know we would love to think it is, but it's not.
It's a harsh reality that, I don't know that, how, from an immunity standpoint, what our level of adaptability is going to be.
Right.
And that's going to be proven out in the long run. There's nothing that, people can speculate about it, all they want. The problem is this, and I know that Colleen I can't speak for her, but I would imagine she'd concur. We don't have enough of a sample yet. And,
right.
You look at things like the Spanish flu or there's any number of these strains that are out there. You look at SARS, you look at all these different things. Even with SARS, that's still a small snapshot,
Right.
But you begin to look at a lot of these influenzas that we've had for, decades, centuries, perhaps, that, you're considering this, and the snapshot that we have it's kind of like people that, if you go to Europe, for instance, and they base the level of violence in America on simply the news broadcasts from Chicago after a weekend. That's not reality. That's just not reality. I mean, I'm sorry.
It is, but it's not. Right.
We don't have, I don't remember the last time we had a homicide I do, but it was 2 or 3 years ago, probably, in the little town that we live in. Chicago is not the rest of the world, just like New York is not, just like Hong Kong is not. And so these are little, from a statistical analysis perspective, it's a very small slice of the pie. And then you have to look at, we're a big country. And so you have to look at all of the little factors, the influencers that come along with living rural versus urban.
Yep.
Somebody that lives near, say, bodies of water versus somebody that lives in the interior of the country. Maybe elevation affects it. Maybe relative humidity affects it. Barometric pressure. All of these things come into play. For a long time, we were just talking, Colleen was just saying how hot she is up there. And I believe that she probably is hot. But I'm in Alabama. I'm really hot down here.
Yeah, we're really hot here in Kentucky, right?
Everybody was saying, there were a lot of people that were saying, well, this thing is going to begin to die off when it heats up. I keep waiting for it to die off as heat, the heat rises. Thing about it is, fall follows summer, and we're in the middle of summer right now. Fall's around the end. We like to think about it when we're little kids, that it's a long ways off. You get old like I am, and you realize the fall's not that far away. It's going to start to cool down again. So what's going to happen then? And so these are all the things that, and these people that are, these people that are juggling, I call it juggling chainsaws on live TV.
Oh God, yeah, I know, right?
Speculative. They're
Right.
throwing spitballs at things, and they're not necessarily going to stick because there's not enough data yet.
And
It
that
reminds
was
me
where
of-
my thought process was from the beginning. I was like, Fauci can stand up there and say anything he wants, but he's not doing anything more than speculating any better than anyone else. Yes, he has a medical degree. I get it. He is a specialist in that thing. But truthfully, like you said, he's basically throwing spaghetti at the wall, and when it falls off, he goes, "Oh shit, that didn't stick. Damn it. What do I do?" So yeah, I totally understand.
It reminds me of the missing Malaysia flight back when they were like, well, I'm going to throw this paper airplane and it'll go into the trash can, and the trash can will be filled with water, and that's supposed to be the ocean. Like,
Right.
when they're just speculating what happened to this airplane. And
is that the one where they came out every single day for
Yes.
so many, and it was like, I have nothing else to say, I can only
Yes.
say this. There's a comedian that does a whole bit on that.
Kathleen Madigan.
Hilarious.
I love her.
Love it. It's hilarious.
I
See,
love her.
Colleen, we found common ground on this. See,
I love
That's
Kathleen
where you find
Madigan.
common ground. No,
But so
yeah, exactly.
It's that when you don't know. And so I was like, you work in more the death spectrum. I work in the living spectrum with patients.
Mhm.
And that we don't know. And every American has an underlying health condition of some kind, whether
Sure.
they know it or not. Every single American does. All of, American diet versus the rest of the world's diet is different. All of these things can have a play into how this illness is going to affect somebody's body. I mean, they're showing that people who had it months ago, have gotten it again, or that the people who had it and are now recovered they have permanent damage to their organs and other medical conditions as a result that are going to be with them the rest of their life. And it's I think one of the experts, I think, had said we're going to be raising a generation of disabled individuals because of the amount of disability that people are going to have after recovering from it, or from being, avoiding it, or from seeing the amount of illness and death just from this. Because, right, there are still people dying from car accidents and murder and heart attacks still, despite
The
this.
flu.
Yeah,
and
I'm wondering,
pneumonia
I can promise you there's going to be a new syndrome from a psychopathology standpoint
Yeah.
that will come out probably in the DSM-6, whenever that happens. And it's going to talk about, I don't know, pandemic related, some kind of psychosis.
Psychosis.
They're gonna-
Right,
gonna have
exactly.
and it'll be something that's coded to be covered under medical insurance, and people will have to receive medication for it, because the idea is, just imagine if you were, if you're OCD, and you have this, where you're always, these folks that are always checking locks and always compulsively washing hands and all these sorts of things.
I have OCD, so you're
and you're worried, you're really worried, and some of the worry is not necessarily unfounded.
Right.
You go, but the thing about it is, if you worry about it all the time, it's going to drive you to the grave. I mean, it
Right.
really will. And so
you're going to stop living life because you're worried about death.
Yeah.
it's going to be a problem for a lot of people, adults who are going to be raising children like this, children who have had to bury their parents and friends and grandparents. It's an unfortunate thing that this country we're not even close to seeing the end of this.
I don't think we're going to see the end of it. That's my whole
well, I mean,
point.
like, we did end swine flu. Like, I had swine flu. Swine flu did end. It took over a year, but it ended, and we moved on. It eventually, something else comes about and becomes the new thing. A new strain of a virus comes in.
Right.
Something else will come. That's why they said, like, we know there's going to be another pandemic. It's just when and where is it going to happen? We know it will. Diseases don't ever stop being created. And just like TB is at the point where it's, no antibiotics can work for it in some areas of the world, and it will kill us all. It's diseases are always going to happen. But I believe that at some point this will, taper off. but not until a lot of Americans, if not half the population, will get this. And I believe around 1/5 of Americans may die from this if they get
Really?
it.
Wow.
I don't think it's anywhere near that high, but I mean,
mean,
that's just, I don't want to get into it any further than we've already done so far. We've already talked a lot about it. Like, so let's get back to Tyllee and JJ Vallow, because that's what we're here talking with Joseph Scott Morgan about tonight. He's one of our favorite, guests, leading death investigator in the country, so he wrote the book on it all, guys, like, and you guys have seen him a million times, and we thank him for being here. So you kind of touched a little bit on, how Tyllee was handled, how JJ was handled in various things that you even talked about a little bit earlier. But I mean, start walking us through this as a death investigator and seeing what has happened with the discovery of these bodies. What are you thinking? Where are you at with all of this?
I got to tell you, when I first, I think I was on, I may have been on Law and Crime or Court TV. I can't remember which one, but it was the first. It was the first night when they released the first generation of aerial photography, and that first generation was taken, I think, from a helicopter, and the later iterations of images came from a drone, which were much more high quality. I don't know if you guys noticed, but if you'll go back to the first photographs that came in, they were kind of grainy. Boy, that next generation was just, I mean, it was remarkable. I don't know what level of I don't understand a lot about drone photography, but suffice it to say, there was a lot of clarity. I had said, that night I remember seeing it, and I saw them digging, and I don't know that I was the first person in the media to actually say, that's fire ring, that's there. I had to be pretty close, though, at that point in time. I just knew that, just simply what I know about rural life, that if you've got a fire ring and you've got a body that's immediately adjacent to it, or they've found remains immediately adjacent to it, I knew that, there was something there, and I knew that fire ring was going to play into it, and of course, ultimately it did. And one of the things I found, both in practice as a death investigator and also covering a lot of cases where fire has been used in order to dispose of remains. It's got two pieces to it. First off, you've got the fire piece, which is most criminals, ne'er-do-wells, don't understand. They have no idea how much work goes into rendering down a human body.
That's what Cloyd was telling us yesterday too.
And it is something that is, you have to show up not just with an accelerant, you have to show up with a sustainable fuel source. Our ancestors have cooked on open fires for years and years. There's a reason people in the out in the backcountry that depend upon fires for warmth in the winter have cords and cords of wood stacked up. They have to sustain that. Fire consumes everything, but in order to facilitate that consuming of items, and also the production of heat, you have to have a sustainable fuel source. You just don't put a couple of pieces on the wood on the fire, pieces of wood on the fire, and then it maintains that constant heat. When you're talking about in the context of cremation itself is a constant application of heat to a human remain that is many times above 1,000 degrees or close to it, and it's sustained for a protracted period of time. And the fuel source with that is natural gas most of the time. Now, if you look back at the Tri-County, I don't know if I mentioned this on your show before, but the Tri-County crematory case from Georgia a few years ago, where the cremation company was not cremating bodies, they were just stacking hundreds and hundreds of bodies out on this farm. And the guy had attempted to hook up his, he hadn't paid his gas bill. I was going to try to hook up the crematory to gas cylinders propane. Propane doesn't burn as hot as natural gas. So that gives you an idea of the heat source and how much it's required. So it's a matter of tending. And there's a couple of factors with that. If you're somebody that is intimately involved, and I'm not talking about sexual reference, I'm just merely saying you have a familial connection to this person, you have to understand that you are essentially there with the body, in this case of a very young woman. In my old eyes, she's a child, of this child, and you're attempting to render her down. How callous do you have to be at that point? Now, I'm still awaiting to see the autopsy reports, and I've got multiple feelers out for those right now, waiting to read them.
And when you get those, you're going to be back here again.
I don't know when that's going to happen, but I'm hoping it will. The other piece to this, there were two pieces I mentioned. You have the dismemberment phase. And one of the problems with that is that, again, people that murder other people don't understand. They intend to butcher a human body because that's what it is. First off, they're not used to it. They don't know what they're going to do. They don't know how to, essentially, if you want to say disassemble a human body, they don't have the skill set in order to do it.
There's so many articulation points and muscles and bones and
you have to have the right tools. I mean, even in the morgue, I don't know if I should say this or not, but over the course of my career, there are certain positions that you're placed in the morgue, working in the morgue, where you literally have to dismember remains in order to facilitate testing. One of the biggest things that we do is decapitation, particularly on severely decomposed bodies. You have to go ahead and remove the head so that the entire head and not the rest of the body can go to a place. Like I used to take heads to the LSU School of Dentistry, and we had a forensic odontologist there that could take the head, place it on a pedestal, and then begin to carefully examine the teeth instead of coming to the morgue, and they could take their time. I've had to take the jaws out of the skull, but I had very specific tools. The bone saws that we used, which are agitating striker saws. People at home can look up that name. It's Striker, just like Striker makes stuff for beds. They make hospital beds. They make all kinds of things. But in our field, they're known for bone saws. They're high-speed agitating saws like a cast saw. That's highly specialized equipment.
Right.
And most people don't understand what they need when they show up. So they might show up with, say, for instance, a carpentry saw. Well, you can use that, but it's not going to have as good of effect. We had the fellow that was up in Seattle that picked up the tender date, the young mother, and brought her back to the home, her own home, I think, and dismembered her body in the bathtub with a limb saw, which is the big bow saw, that you see people cutting off with. Yeah. It's got really, the teeth are very spread out, very robust. That's not a good thing for using that to disassemble a human body. And Colleen, you're right, because there are these contact points or these joints that where it makes it a lot easier. But in order to get just to those points where the body can be disarticulated like a chicken in a sink, you have to go through soft tissue. Well, you're not going to go through soft tissue with a saw.
No.
You have to be willing to have a very, very sharp instrument in order to facilitate this. And I know I'm being very graphic, but I just want everyone to understand what the problem is with this. And so it's striking to me that whoever did this specifically, I don't know if it's Alex, I don't know who it is, but I'm just saying whoever did it.
My money's on Alex, but hey.
The fact is that they obviously attempted to dismember, then they attempted to burn. Both of those are an attempt to destroy. So they went to great lengths. It would just be interesting to know how far they got, because at this point in time, I don't know. And I don't even want to speculate on that.
Right.
And I don't know how far the body was rendered down. They got her identified very quickly. I mean, my hat's off to
through orthodontic records, right?
Through whatever capacity that the dental community was involved, and that's a very solid thing to do. Of course, you do in fact have DNA. There was viable DNA, I'm sure. If not from soft tissue, they could have certainly gone into the tooth and gleaned some from the tooth root, and perhaps from the pulp rather. And so my point is that they turn that around pretty quickly. And then on the other side, we've got JJ, and I think that and I'm not a forensic psychologist, but it speaks volumes to me as an investigator.
Yes.
The way these two bodies were handled. JJ's body was handled in a very I don't know. I wouldn't use the word sacred, but his body was
caring.
Yeah, there was some care that was brought to this event with the way his body was prepared. I find it very interesting that they felt the need to double wrap his body with his head being wrapped. Most of the time when I see head wrapping, I think one of two things. The biggest thing that you think about is what a manifestation we call face covering, which is where if you find a covered face at a crime scene, many times this is associated with an intimate connection.
They don't want to look.
Right. They don't want to look in the eyes. They'll go to some effort to close the eyes, and they'll put a blanket over the face. We see that. I've seen pillowcases over faces. But the fact that it was a plastic bag. Now, I don't know if this was like something that someone had gotten at the grocery store or at Walmart, like that kind of bag.
Right.
Or if it was, say, a white, I've heard the color white, that was a white trash bag liner, that has the pull strings on it, the red pull strings that you use in your kitchen. And then they're wrapped in a tarp. So, but back to the wrapping of the head, I find that kind of interesting. Was the head wrapped in order to do a face covering? Was it wrapped because they were trying to contain trauma, like a bloody area on the head? They didn't want to drain blood. Or was it used as a modality for suffocation? And I would urge all of the listeners, the viewers, to consider this. If you get an opportunity, pick up a copy of a book, and some of you have heard of it, called Final Exit. I worked several suicides that are directly related to Final Exit. There's also a guy named Derek Humphrey. He wrote it. It's part of a group called the Hemlock Society, and they don't call it suicide. They call it self-deliverance. And it addresses methodologies and how to take your life in a painless way. And they call it painless self-deliverance. One of the modalities that they talk about is using a plastic bag. And what they discuss in here is just ingesting something as simple as diphenhydramine. Like if you drink a copious amount of like NyQuil, place the bag over the head. You put ice inside the bag because you're rebreathing air and it's hot. Right. And then you go to sleep and you'll suffocate. And I'm wondering if maybe he could have been applied with something.
Well, that could make sense because Alex was called to bring him or to take him away because he was quote unquote being a zombie. And he went to Alex's, and then Melanie talks about him coming back and thinking that he was asleep. He seemed like he was asleep. So if something like that had happened, would line up with that kind of idea that they did this, and then when they were bringing him back, he would have appeared just as if he was asleep instead of dead. How
many times do you go and check the pulse on a sleeping child? It just
it
doesn't happen in my household. When my kids were little, they could fall asleep anywhere.
Right.
A lot of times I was hoping they would fall asleep somewhere. But that doesn't. It's quite interesting. Because the earlier accounts was that he'd even got up on the cabin tree and had crawling around and all these sorts of things, acting like a wild man. But let's think about JJ and about his medical background. This child is diagnosed with autism. He's medicine dependent. My understanding is he hadn't been taking his medication.
Right.
But this is a child that was used to being given medication from an adult. So if you're used to being given medication, it's not beyond the pale to think, well, maybe if they said, a grown-up that's in charge says, here, you're going to take this.
It's your new medication, right?
Yeah, it's your new medication or whatever the case might be. And maybe it's, who knows? Hopefully they're going to have enough. The tissue will not be compromised enough so that they can effectively do toxicology. And I hope that they do a very wide spectrum toxicological testing. I mean, just, this is one of those cases where if I hear hoofbeats, I'm thinking camel, not horse. And so I won't cover everything.
Right.
I want to make sure that any possibility is entertained, but that starts with the investigation at the house.
Yeah.
What do you have, or what do these people in charge have access to? What were their habits? I would go to all of their doctors.
Which makes me think about the fact that they had another search done, and there was things brought out in brown bags that we don't know about after the bodies have been found. So that makes me wonder if that's what they're looking for, is something like what you're talking about here.
And and this is going to require. If I were the investigator on the case, I would tell you, and I'm not.
Right.
I don't want to be. But if I were the investigator on the case, I would go into Alex's background. I would go into Lori's background. I would go into Chad's background. And as many of these other people that are associated with this thing that they're involved with, that have direct, intimate contact, and I'm going to want to know what their medical history is. I want to know what meds have been prescribed to all these people, because you're talking, it doesn't take much to compromise the system of an 8-year-old little boy, particularly a child that's already compromised anyway. And Lord only knows what level of care he's been given. And another thing that is going to be very interesting is to see what shape his body was in. How many post-mortem versus ante-mortem insults had he sustained? Is there any evidence that he had retreating contusions, something that maybe had happened in advance of this, and they were in some kind of healing stage? But the problem is that this child has been down for so long. The upside is that his body was cocooned. And so that's key. I know I'm all
Talk
over
about
the
stupidly preserving evidence, and you think about that, and you brought up earlier, how long it takes to render a body or cut them up or whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, these are people who thought, oh, my wife is at work, and I'll just make up that a raccoon was out here, and I'm burning a body. So did you really think you were going to burn a body in the time while your wife is at work and come home and there not be any evidence of what is going on there? What in the world? Well, it also makes me wonder, do you think there's going to be a connection between, we've talked about Tammy passing from natural causes, but nobody believes this. So do you think that the toxicology may give us clues from Tammy as to what might have been carried on with the children as well, as far as poisoning or anything like that?
Well, the fact that she succumbed in the same house where the bodies were found, I think is that, from an investigative standpoint, that is a huge marker for me. Whether or not at a chemical level or a toxicological level, there's going to be connectivity, I have no way of knowing. Her body was so compromised that I would think it would be very difficult. Now, I'm hoping against hope that they find something. I truly am. And to this point, we have not heard anything.
Right.
But the fact, and I hope that they prove me wrong, but the fact that she was, in fact, embalmed and buried for this protracted period of time is going to greatly diminish the odds. And that's
Right.
what I'm thinking of. With the two kids, however, to the best of my knowledge, they weren't embalmed. And,
Right.
you know, and this whole thing, I got to tell you, one little side here is that, you know, for all of his supposed prowess as a grave digger in life, this is an example of the type of grave digging that you did. I can't believe that you ever dug more than one or two graves in your career.
Right.
18 inches
If he
deep.
was directly involved in it as opposed to solely Alex, I'm thinking if
definitely.
someone had knowledge of it. Maybe Alex was a minion and he, you know, did his master's bidding. I have no idea. But this, you know, when you look at those images, and we get back to that just for a second, if you look at these images, this is not, and I'm focusing on Tylee's grave. This is not a deep grave.
Right.
I would, as a matter of fact, from an excavation standpoint, I would probably term this as a shallow grave.
Yeah.
Now, deep graves are 6 feet and deeper, as far as I'm concerned. You know, those are deep graves, and it takes a lot of effort to do this.
Oh, yeah.
One thing that's kind of poignant to me, though, if people at home will go back and look at the fire pit images after it's been cleaned out, there is this shadow that's on the ground that's kind of haunting, and it's it's over to one side, and I don't know. When I looked at the thing, it was, if you're looking at a clock face, it would have been right in the 2 to 4 o'clock position on the clock face. Again, that's going to be dependent upon how the photograph is oriented that the public takes a look at. But there was the outline of what could have been a human body in a fetal position, and the area is black right there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that was striking to me. It really was, and it was very sad. You know, so if her body, if that is representative of where Tylee's remains were, there was not much effort made at dismembering.
No.
Because that looks like a body. It looks like an almost completely intact body. So that would be, you know, I couldn't appreciate like lower legs or whatever, but you could appreciate kind of that contracted appearance. Yeah, you know, in the upper waist. But just take a look, and and if I were a bet man, I'd say that the body was laying left recumbent, so left side, you know, contracted, you know, drawn up like this, and there was this kind of carbon area on the ground right there that kind of fit with that silhouette.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it right now, and that's exactly what it looks like. And again, it's just, I think they didn't really realize how much work it takes to disassemble and disarticulate a body. It's hard, laborious work, especially if you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
And that it takes a lot of work to be able to burn a body. You know, I have looked it up before because I did a lot of my bachelor degree work on the Holocaust. You know, a flame has to be between 1,500 and 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit to burn a body, and it has to sit there for a long period of time.
So that's sustained heat.
Yeah.
It's not just a flash over.
Right. So, it has to be that hot for that sustained period of time. And that's why there are horrible, you know, allegations and, you know, if not rumors about what the Nazis did in terms of burning bodies. That people could smell the smoke, that especially if you're burning millions of bodies. But I mean, there were some horrible rumors about, you know, soap making and other things. And you can still see the bodies inside of the crematorium because, you know, there were so many bodies that there was just not a sustained amount of heat long enough to burn every single body.
Right.
And they had said that at like Auschwitz-Birkenau, they were getting to the point where there were too many bodies. They started doing like open flame pits to try to burn bodies, but the heat wasn't strong enough. So then they ended up burying them, but they buried them too shallow. And then the flooding of the area brought all the bodies to the surface. And then they had to redig ground, and unfortunately they used the prisoners to do that. It was horrifying.
Horrible.
But
Yeah.
It's a lot of work
Just
to destroy a body, and that's why you typically don't. Most people either they get an individual cremation, or they get buried in a casket deep underground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
right.
for people to do this to your own children
another piece to this with crematories, a lot of people don't realize that with crematories, even after a body's cremated, the body is on a many times it's placed in a very cheap wooden box. You can call it a casket if you want to, or in like a cardboard box. It's kind of an initiator. And once the body burns on this conveyor belt, the conveyor belt goes in the front side of the crematory, burns. There's a little window you can peek through.
Right.
The other door opens, and a classic movie, if you ever want to check it out, that kind of describes it accurately, is Diamonds Are Forever, James Bond movie. And James Bond actually trapped in a crematory. But one of the things that's at the end of the line that a lot of people don't realize is that there is literally a stone bone crusher. Yeah. And so you've got wheels that roll in the opposite direction. And the ash passes between that contact points of the two wheels, and it renders down anything else, because you still have, shards of bone that are left. And of course, when you put these in an urn, you return it to the family, and it's dust and powder. But yeah, it is a serious undertaking. And if people want to know more about problems that can go wrong, I urge them all to check out the case. If they will just simply Google the term tri-state crematory case, that's out of Georgia, and dig into that. The fellow's name, I just thought of it, was Ray Brent Marsh is his name, and he was a funeral director whose family owned a crematory, and he literally left hundreds of bodies laying on the ground and just thrown into crypts that he had on the property just to have them decay and rot, because he didn't have a sufficient crematory any longer. It was a horrible, horrible case, and I know people that worked it, and they were haunted by it. And that just shows you, back to this case with Tyllee and JJ, though, one of the things that is interesting to me, I think, and it's going to be hard to establish other than timestamps that they have on things, is what type of chronology are we talking about here relative to Tylee's death and JJ's death? Will there be enough physical evidence that is found within these graves and at the scene, and will it be able to contribute? I think they have other ways to find these markers, but will it be able to, the data that they collect out there, will it be able to contribute to the narrative that they're trying to create about what happened?
Right.
And again, that brings us to the condition of the body.
And I do believe that's why the co-conspiracy to conceal and all of that came about, because they laid it out as the three of them being co-conspirators in that. And I think we'll see a branch off of that is who they're going to determine is, what person played what role. We've worried about this in several different ways, because we're worried that it's all going to get put on, well, Alex, I just was there, or and we're worried that maybe that'll be a lesser charge. I don't know. I think they're still going to get pretty fierce charges on this, and I think they've got a lot of evidence that we don't even know about yet.
Well, like we were talking with Cloyd yesterday, was that the fact that they left, their kids are missing, then they went to Hawaii. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence that the prosecutors are going to have that if your kids were missing and you didn't know what happened to them, would you leave on vacation to Hawaii?
Right.
No.
Yeah, I think that a little birdie told me that more charges are pending.
Oh God, yeah.
And they're coming. I think that everybody in the community that's interested in these cases, because there are more rocks to overturn here.
Oh, good God.
It's spread out over such a massive geographic area.
Yeah.
Multiple jurisdictions, not the least of which is the federal government, because that's where they've really screwed the pooch here because you've got Uncle Sugar looking at you. And that's not a good position for anybody. They have unlimited resources. The fact that they hop from state to state, and you have all of these events, and if they can tie this back, remember the feds don't have a murder charge. Okay, murder charges are state charges. What they're looking at, that's why when if you look at the famous Mississippi burning case, it wasn't for the feds. It wasn't about the deaths of the three workers or the four. It had to do with violation of their civil rights. Of course, the ultimate violation of civil rights, have your life removed or have your life taken away from you. And so with the feds, I think what they're looking at, and one of the things they're going to go down is probably a conspiracy charge. That's a multi-state conspiracy charge. And I think that this whole cult thing is going to play into it because I think
big time.
I think this guy is probably looking to defraud people. And that's what they're staring down the barrel of right now, metaphorically, Mr. Daybell. And they're going to use this as a point of leverage for all of these people that are involved in it. And my thought is that typologies like him tend to take certain people into their confidences. And if he's got this ring of people that surround him and that are followers, somebody's going to know something. And then when they're faced with the idea that, look, you're going to take a journey up the river here, brother, and you're looking at a lot of time. We're going to destroy your life, as a matter of fact. And you either sing for us right now, or you're going to have problems. Like Miss Maxwell is currently experiencing over in Houston, or is about to
Ready.
So we've got that can of worms, and so that's what you're looking at. They're trying to leverage people right now, and that's the way the feds work. And
I'm waiting for Maxwell's attorney to do a press conference at this point and be like, Miss Maxwell has no intent on killing herself, and she does not have COVID, and she is not planning on killing herself. So if she ends up dead, she was not suicide.
Yeah, well,
I'm waiting for that case.
They got to get her on record quick because her life is fleeting.
As soon as she was arrested, it was all over Twitter. Like, in the future, Glendina Maxwell did not kill herself.
Right. And if you haven't seen our episode with Joseph Scott Morgan on Epstein, you definitely need to go check that out right now here on this channel. It was a great conversation we had with him. And I'm sure we'll talk about Miss Maxwell at some point.
I'm so excited. I'm ready for that.
Unbelievable. She is going to go down a river that is not good. I'm so sad. I feel bad that it's hung on her alone, damn. But then
I heard she's ready to talk. I heard she's ready to talk. And you know who's hilarious, though? I have to mention this side note, is Dershowitz. Alan Dershowitz is hilarious because he has been posting on Twitter about that he had nothing to do with Maxwell. No, nothing to do with Epstein. And we all know that's crap. But also, the day she was arrested, he put out an article in a newspaper saying that she needs to be taken as innocent until proven guilty and believed.
Oh, my God.
And he's like, I hope she has sex tapes because then she can, he's trying to legally extort her on Twitter that I waive all of my civil rights so she could put those out there to prove that I'm not in them. And I'm like, Dershowitz, you are digging the fastest grave I've ever seen.
You're not getting a word out of me about Alan Dershowitz. I'm just a poor old forensic science professor.
Are you pleading the fifth, Joe? Are you pleading the fifth?
However, I will never plead the fifth. Is that I will always ask this question. I will never stop asking this question. Where are the children?
Where did the children?
And that's what I want to know. I want to know where all of these children that Epstein had his filthy little fingers on for all these years, and Miss Ghislaine Maxwell, where these youngins go, because they brought in Virginia Roberts has said, I rewatched it the other day. It was a great piece on Australia from 60 Minutes.
Yes, I love that.
And she talked about how the girls that she was in the room with could not speak English, and she's alluded to the fact, I think in the Vanity Fair interview, that these girls had Eastern European accents. And I have to think, if you're talking about 14-year-old children, how did they wind up getting back to Eastern Europe, and were they just cut loose into the U.S. to just roam the streets?
Yep.
So that's my question, because some of them might still be out there for all we know.
Yep.
Yeah.
I believe they are. And I heard Prince Andrew is fighting extradition as the U.S. wants him.
Well, here's a crazy thing that I saw that I posted on our Facebook page, and it could be Photoshopped for all I know. I just put it out there, and I was like, that's really interesting. It's a picture of one of the last pictures of John Benet Ramsey all dressed up, and in the audience of right by John Benet is a picture of Miss Maxwell. And like, so it's like,
I couldn't say one way or another.
Right. But it was like, I was like, oh my, is this a coincidence? This is interesting. Like, hey, again, we might actually get answers to John Benet in all of this, you know.
If you go down the rabbit hole of further.
Oh, I don't like that rabbit hole at all. But I'm just saying that would be an interesting twist on that. Like,
yes,
okay.
The rest of 2020 is shaping out to be a really insane year with the amount of criminal cases, the amount of federal issues, worldwide issues. You know, it's shaping out to be a mess. And the latter of 2020 and the next few years are going to be a mess for thousands of people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and we were just talking, like we just talked about this with our publicist today, because we were talking about how I think that there's going to be a huge change in Hollywood, because so much is going to come out from this if she gets the chance to talk, you know, that it's going to open doors for people like us who are, you know, independents and not, you know, we're not up there where we've gotten, you know, in the doors of everything, that they're going to turn to people like us for content, because there's going to be a whole heck of a lot of people that are exiting out of Hollywood real quick here.
Well, I think that one of the interesting things, you know, I've been to a few cocktail parties out there, and one of the interesting things is that, you know, you can talk about politicians all day long and about this kind of image that they put forward, and you know that probably about 50% of the time, anytime politicians talk to you, they're lying. All right.
50%? I put it closer to 90, but well, okay.
I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt.
You're giving them the benefit of the doubt. You're being very generous, Joe.
People accept that from politicians. It's just kind of standard fare. However, the folks out there, they have people that create an image for them.
Yep.
And you know, the fact that I think just I hesitate to mention this, but just the flight logs alone, when you begin to see these people that are held up as moral icons by many, you know, it is going to change the face of things. I think a good start was probably with Weinstein. You know, when all of that kicked off, I found it. You know, I found several comments by people out there interesting, troubling. I have yet to hear hopeful comments yet. Hopefully I will. But look, you know, there's the old saying, money talks and other types of things walk. And if there's money involved in it, people are going to gravitate to that. Their morals suddenly get checked at the door. We'll see what happens.
Well, I think, like you said, Weinstein is a prime example. I think Weinstein died on a sword, man. Like, I think he did what he did so that it doesn't come out that there was more. Like, he took his charges the way he did, you know. So it's like, okay, well, I don't know what, and I'm sure that he's got lots of information too. I guarantee you. Also,
I think I'm kind of an Anglophile as well. I'm not English by ancestry. I'm Welsh, but we've taken several trips, my family and I have, to Great Britain. We were at the Queen's birthday for her, I don't know, her 75th anniversary on the throne, or whatever the hell it was.
Right.
They all run together after a while. But
sure.
When that image popped up this week of Spacey and Maxwell in the throne room, you know, and I love pardon me, I bumped my camera. We've developed a real affinity. My family and I have, and we have many friends in Liverpool and a couple other locations. I have a real affinity for for the Brits, and they're sweet, very sweet people, and been very kind to us. And I know with what esteem many of them hold royalty. Now, some of them don't like it, some of them like it, and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, that's their throne room.
Yeah.
And the fact that Spacey and Maxwell were occupying that space, seated in a very inappropriate manner on both of those seats of power, because that's what they are. That's what they represent to millions of people. It just goes, again, we're kind of cycled back to this idea of the diminishment of things.
Yep.
And how people have no regard for things. And I think that it's a real slap in the face. And, my wife and I, we sit around many times and we talk about, we'll see images of Prince Andrew, and we listen to that very awkward interview that he gave and that sort of thing. And we sit there and we think, in our own Southern way, and we look at each other and said, can you imagine what his mama's saying right now in her mind? That whole idea, you could just see her taking that little patent leather white pocketbook and just beating the hell out of him with it.
Yes.
Have you lost your mind, boy? And thinking about that and what kind of horror he has wrought, upon them, with this. This guy won't even, he normally goes to, what was it? It was something he canceled today. There's a trip that he takes to France every year. And today he canceled it. And the hint, at least in the article, was the fact that I think he's afraid that he's going to get extradited.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Even though France has never allowed Roman Polanski to be extradited.
Sure.
But he doesn't want to risk.
Okay, but there's a difference between Roman Polanski and a British royal. Because if it's a British royal, France is going to be like, oh, no, you can have him. Take him. I don't care.
You might be right.
I mean, because they have no love for us, don't get me wrong, but they have absolutely no love for Britain. There is no love there. So,
right. And I'm sure Queen Elizabeth is absolutely mortified. I mean, she spent her entire life as a royal portraying this high image of that superiority, being a great role model. I mean, she served in the war, and she's been a ruler for 50 plus years. And I think the last time she sat in the throne room was in the 70s. She hasn't sat there in a long time. So when I saw that photo, I was like, oh, I hope this is photoshopped. Oh, please don't let this be true.
Colleen, I thought the same thing, because that is, if he's not that he would, but if Andrew is trying to paint himself in the light of being a victim in this whole thing, and trying to get the support of the British people, this is a real thumb in their eye, because I mean it is a slap in the face of these people that hold that. I mean, how many how many British commoners, and they do have commoners, they've got people just like we do. How many commoners do you think have ever set foot in that room? But they've always heard about it. They've heard about it from maybe their kinfolks that have been in there at some point in time for something, or your grandma passed through there at some point in time. They saw this. And then you've got the likes of Kevin Spacey splayed all in this seat, along with Ghislaine Maxwell, who now appears to be reincarnation of a demon straight out of hell when it comes to these little girls. So, and there they are, seated on these thrones. So it's kind of it's going to be interesting to see how the tabloids treat this and how the British people treat this. Tabloids are one thing. News is the news. They're always going to create more of it. The news creates more news than they actually cover news. Trust me. All right. Absolutely. So, with this little deal though, you've now stuck your hand into the chest of the British people and played with their heart now, and that's something that's very difficult to overcome. And trust me, it will be written about over there.
Oh yeah, especially because I mean there was so much controversy when Harry married Meghan, and then when they left the royal family and moved, and
which makes you wonder if they knew this was coming, and that they were like, oh, we don't want to be anywhere near that shit, so that's gonna stink real bad. So let's get the hell out,
Right.
Yeah,
Like
and I've had, I've had a couple of pints at a few pubs over there discussing this, and just say, look, I'm an ignorant American. And, I had one fellow look at me and say, you didn't have to tell me that. So he already knew, which is fine with me. It was all in good fun. But, many of the folks over there had, many of the people that were kind of on the cusp of not knowing whether or not they thought that the monarchy was necessary any longer, that it had faded.
Yeah.
This type of, I'm just telling you, this is explosive. This type of thing is the kind of thing that where they just say, look, I'm sick to my back teeth of this whole thing. Yeah. Now, now they've ruined us as a country, right. And it's horrible.
I mean, the thing here is like, okay, so you talk about British royalty there, but Hollywood is our royalty here. Like, if you really want to think about it, they are our royalty. They are the people that are revered. They are looked at as heroes. They're looked at as, role models. And none of those things should happen. None of those, they're just people. They should not be looked at to any of those things by any means at all. I've always tried to teach my kids that that's not, don't glorify what Hollywood is. That I work in the industry, and I'm astounded at certain things that I hear and see, and I'm like, God, I can't believe that. But it's been devastating to me. Like you said, the flight logs looks like a who's who of Hollywood. Who's who of important people, and it's crazy. It's like, you're sitting here thinking all of those people are the people that we go and we get our entertainment from and that we love every day and are what we all call enjoyment. What is going to happen? That is going to crush people. There are people, you think Bill Cosby going to jail was a blow to the American people, because that was Bill Cosby. Like, he was Dr. Huxtable. He was in every one of our living rooms for years. And just, he was the epitome of, like, he was the clean comic and he da-da-da. And that was devastating for many, many, many people. I cannot imagine seeing some of the names, thinking about who it is, going, please not that one. Please not that one.
Yeah, never meet your heroes. That's
no, because right, these are people who have played roles in children's shows, children's movies, animated movies. They have kids themselves.
Yes,
they've been role models. Meeting kids and girls and being heroes for so many decades, and knowing that they could be involved. Some of them may not have been. Maybe they were just, friends, they rode on the plane, who knows. But there are people who were involved in underage sex trafficking and pedophilia with girls. And even who are children. And it's going to destroy so many lives, not just of the victims, but of, the people in that person's life, their fans and friends and family across the world.
Well, you also have to think about, like, who are they all in contact with? Like you're saying, ruining so many lives, and like thinking about the fact of, my child was with them. Did they do something to my child? Like, we spent summers in whatever. Did they do something during that period of time? Like, just because if you're doing it, you're not just doing it on some random island once in a while. It's more than that, obvious. It is. It just is. Because that's in your soul. That's something that you're doing. That is who you are. That is, and you're not just going to stop because you left the island. So that's upsetting.
On Nancy's show, I guess it was a couple of years ago, we covered Corey Feldman, and that. When the story was told about, I got to get them straight, Corey Haim, and a lot of this information began to come out. There was always, there's always been rumors that have floated around, everybody from Michael Jackson to all these other people, that kind of weave their way in and out. and whose lives they've touched, over this
Mm-hmm.
period of time. And they've created this real blanket of secrecy over the years. And it's a dirty little secret, very dirty,
Yeah. Yep.
very, it's not
Yep.
little, it's
Mm-hmm.
insidious. It's absolutely insidious. And people, parents are willing to drink the Kool-Aid if it means that it's going to get their kids one step closer.
Yes.
They'll put these little innocents in harm's way.
Yep.
Just that they can be. I reflect back, all those years ago, the first time I ever read The Godfather, Mario Puzo,
Mm-hmm.
and there's the infamous scene in the movie where the Hollywood producer wakes up with a horse's head in his bed and he's covered in blood. Well, that was preceded by, in the book, it's preceded a story in that book about him raping a little 12-year-old girl that had been brought to his house for an audition.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean,
there's
we all know about the casting couch and all of that. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so and it goes further than just adult women. It's little kids, and so you can find people that are manipulative enough that they can put themselves in positions of power. They might not be in front of the camera, but if they have predispositions for this kind of behavior, this twisted behavior, then they can put themselves in a position of leverage, and they can do all kinds of horrible things to people's lives and destroy them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we got off subject here, but we always do with you. We talk about everything every time you come on. That's what I love about talking with you.
I've got to go be back with my family now anyway.
Yeah, no problem. We really appreciate it, Joe. You always come on. You always give us such great information. As this, unfolds more in several different cases, you're going to be back here with us. We always appreciate it.
Be more than happy.
We thank you for your time always. So thank you so much for joining us today. Have a good night, okay?
Yes,
stay safe.
Bye, guys.
Hey, guys. So a couple nights ago, we launched a special campaign along with Cheryl McCollum from the Cold Case Research Institute called Love Wins. And what this is it is our answer to all the chaos that's kind of going on right now. The chaos from the riots, the chaos from all the different, pandemic, everything that's happening in our lives right now. All the issues with, the different lost lives that we've had from before the protesting, after the protesting. So all the lost lives that have come out of this, the lost lives of COVID even. And so #LoveWins is a movement to usher in peace, and knowing that above all, the only way that we're going to get through all of this is loving each other. So what we're actually doing here is we are creating a scholarship fund in remembrance of all the lost lives in 2020 so far, and ushering in peace. And this scholarship fund will go to anyone that wants to go ahead and enter to win. The criteria is really cool. All you have to do is make a 30-second video of yourself and explaining to us how you lead with love. And we are looking for college-age students that are, struggling. Maybe they can't get scholarships. Maybe there's a reason, that they aren't available for them, or it's just not enough for them. And so this is our way of helping out. We're hoping to raise about $5,000. If we raise more than that, then we'll look into giving more than one scholarship away. The way that we're doing this is we have some merchandise. It's #LoveWins merchandise. And there's also Lead with Love merchandise. They've got shirts, cups, mugs, stickers, anything you could possibly want. And we're going to have it on a couple different platforms. Currently, we're doing some on TeePublic, but I'm working on some on Cafe Press too, because they have a lot more variety of merchandise. And so we'll be donating a portion of the proceeds that we collect on this merchandise to the scholarship fund that we are creating. And then we also have a GoFundMe that will be listed in the show notes of our YouTube show and our podcast, and you guys can click on it and you can donate any amount you'd like, and all of the proceeds from that are going to go ahead and go to the scholarship fund. And we'll be showing you exactly how the money is distributed, how it's collected. We're going to be very transparent with this. We're working with some amazing professionals that from like Cheryl from the Cold Case Institute, Stephen David Lampley from the Oliphant Institute, the leading death investigator, Joseph Scott Morgan. So we're working with all of them to really show how much love wins over everything and bringing peace to a country that we really need it right now. So that's what we're doing. And we're going to go ahead and play our entries at the top of every podcast and every YouTube until we choose a winner. And our special guests that we have each week, the different people that come on and are here with us, Cheryl and Stephen and Joseph, they'll all be a part of choosing that lucky winner or winners, depending on how much we end up getting donated. So I hope that you guys join us in #LoveWins. And we hope that we get some really great entrants, because we really want to see how you lead with love. Well, thanks so much for tuning in and dishing true crime with the Good Wives and Murder by Design.
Don't forget to join our Patreon member club to get exclusive mini episodes, inside documents and pictures from the case, live YouTube discussions, our exclusive discussion group on Facebook, and get some amazing Good Wives merch. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at truecrimewives.
And for more inside information, check out our podcast, The Good Wives Guide to True Crime, on any of your favorite podcast players. Have a good one from The Good Wives, serving up true crime one dish at a time.